Hello and welcome to the Being Human podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Bottaro, and today I've got another fun episode to share with you that I actually recorded with another podcast host, Deacon Charlie Echeverry. He has a podcast called Living the Call, and I was on his show, and I just had such a great time, and I felt like the conversation was one of those really beautiful sort of synergistic kind of meeting of minds of collaboration, and he's over on the West Coast, so it was like East Coast, West Coast. I don't know, it wasn't like a rap battle or anything like that, but it was just a really interesting meeting of different perspectives. It was very clear that he's coming from a really embedded world of he's on top of sort of the media, and I had not actually known too much about him beforehand, but kind of digging deeper, I realized, wow, he's kind of a big deal. And he was a top executive at Walt Disney, at AOL, and going way back to AOL days, and he's gotten into media, all this stuff before he became a deacon, and so he's got a lot of experience in the world. He was actually born in Hollywood, California. He traveled the world. He has a lot of experience with Latino communities. He was in Florida for a while. Now he's back in California. He's running this awesome podcast. And so I was really blessed and honored to be invited onto his podcast. And then in the conversation, it just went really into really cool places with talking about AI and a lot of what makes us human and integration and a lot of the things that we talk about on a normal basis here, but applied to current contemporary culture and things that are really important. One of the things that came up, which I found interesting as it came up in the conversation, is also to explore a little bit this emerging world of psychedelic assisted therapy. And this is actually something that I've had an interest in for a while, because it's very clear that times are changing in regard to the medical sciences and the political approach to this very, very hot topic, hot button issue. And so I haven't really talked about this too much here or through CatholicPsych, but being on somebody else's episode, the topic started to come up, and then we got into it. And so I wanted to share this with you as well as a kind of just scratching the surface introduction. It's a very interesting thing. And I think people may have some reactions to this topic for good reason. And I think that it's a very heavy topic. It's a hot button topic because it's a very heavy reality of the overlap between medicine, spirituality, people's questions about what are these drugs that are being used now. People have a history and from different positions and perspectives on drug use, and especially when you have something that was an illicit, illegal drug, and in many places still is. What does this mean that it's becoming legalized? It's becoming researched. There's a whole nother topic of medical cannabis, which we don't get into here, but if people sort of apply thinking of one to the other, it forms the conversation a certain way. And so, as in all things, from a Catholic perspective, we have a very wide lens of what we want to look at, talk about, evaluate, analyze. If we have the foundation of truth and the source and summit of all truth and this fullness, that means that we can literally look at anything and we can really open up and go past the surface. So I'm offering this to you as an introduction to the conversation. It's something that I think we'll have to be talking about a lot more. And as I read the research and I see what's happening, there's really profound and really wonderful research that gives hope to healing things like severe trauma and depression, suicidality, a lot of the war vets coming back that are getting healing. And at the same time, we see this recreational culture of drug use, and then people start throwing in the spiritual dimension of this, and it's like, is this substance helping people find God? How can that be? So of course we want to have a critical lens through which we analyze these things and talk about these things. And so we're just scratching the surface here in this conversation, like I said. But I did want to kind of give you a front end heads up here to say that all the responses are welcome. All of the parts are welcome. We talked about parts a lot of times here, and we all have lots of reasons for having lots of reactions. And so I do invite your feedback, and also to let you know that there's probably more to come in this area. I think as states begin to legalize this particular kind of medical intervention, and also start researching and exploring it more, I think we're going to have a more developed Catholic approach and a Catholic answer to exactly what's going on here. If just because the medical profession endorses something, that doesn't automatically say that it's all okay. And also, just because it has maybe a darker shadow side of its history, that also doesn't mean it's also all bad. So how can we find the middle? How do we find the both and? What do we look for? We're just beginning the conversation, but I hope this blesses you. And also, check out Deacon Echeverry's podcast, and that will be in the show notes here as well. God bless you.
I spent the last 10 years learning how to help people using the best techniques available in psychology integrated with the Catholic faith. Now we've figured out that there's a better way to help people than just slapping a Catholic label on the same secular model of therapy you find anywhere else. The real question is, how will we make this shift to a new model of truly Catholic accompaniment, keeping the psychological sciences in mind while opening up to a more human and more effective approach? This podcast is here to give you the answer. Join me and follow along as I take you behind the scenes of what this new model looks like, using recorded audio from sessions working with my team, with colleagues, and even directly with clients. My name is Dr. Greg Bottaro, and I want to welcome you to the Being Human podcast.
Dr. Greg Bottaro, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here with you.
Did I get your last name right?
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Is it Italian?
It's Italian, yeah.
What part?
Sicily, actually.
My wife's family's from Bari, which is in the south. So similarly, I've never been to Sicily. Yep. Have you?
Yeah, a few times. It's beautiful. We still have some distant family there. We go visit, and I've spent some time there.
I was watching some videos on YouTube about the whole dollar house thing, where it was like a lot of the municipalities in Italy were selling the houses for $1. I mean, really interesting. I mean, as it turns out, it doesn't end up costing you $1, but it costs you like, I don't know, 10,000 euros. But still, that's for, all in on getting a new property and getting it in Italy. It seems like could be a good deal.
Yeah, the thing is, I've looked into these things too, and it's a really important sort of distinction to know that you're going into a housing market and housing infrastructure that is radically different than what we're used to in the U.S. And so you get tied up in all sorts of jurisdictional issues. If you think permits and all those kinds of things are a problem here, like if you ever deal with any of that, people are wrapped up in the town hall stuff for like 10 years. Taxes are not clear. Nobody knows really what they're paying in their own property taxes. And then all of a sudden you'll get a bill for like 10 years of back taxes because they just never got around to sending it out. But then you supposedly owe like 10 years of taxes.
And now you're the owner.
Yeah. Don't be tricked by the $1 offer. There's definitely a lot more involved.
But it's funny about Italy. When I first went to Italy, this was probably maybe 2000. I don't know, 15 or 16 was the first time I ever went. I travel a lot, and my wife and I made it a point to kind of raise our kids and spend our money on travel rather than a lot of other things. So I've been to, 40 plus countries. My wife's been to 20 plus. My kids have been to, I have 5 kids, and my kids, even before they were like double digit, they'd been to a dozen countries. So we do a lot.
How old are your kids now?
My youngest actually will be 21 this year in November. So we're empty nesters. But my point about the bringing up Italy is that I never wanted to go because not never wanted to go. That's too strong. It's not the first place I thought about, because since I have this love for travel and adventure, I always wanted to go to like Madagascar or, to Africa somewhere, or, the South Pacific, or these kind of more random places. But my wife is Italian. As I mentioned, her family's from, her extended family's from Bari, and also some in Napoli and Naples. But she was like, I want to go. And what took us to Italy the first time, ironically, was a Saint Francis of Bologna, which is a kind of quasi incorruptible, but it happens to be that saint is born and died on the same date, which happens to be my wife's birthday. And so my wife had this affinity for this sort of little known saint. She's like, I want to go to Italy. I want to visit this saint. That's what created our first trip. Long story, but the point of bringing it up is that I was blown away by Italy. Like I had such, like, generally speaking, low expectations insofar as this is where everybody vacations. Like, people go to France, they go to Italy, everybody wants to go to Europe. And so, like, it should be, I almost had this sense like, what's going to impress me? But I love Italy. Like, it's crazy. I've been back like 5 times since then. But every time I go is just amazing experience. Beautiful people. I'm not saying it's worth the headache of what you just described to own a dollar house, but but it's such a amazing country, especially if you're Catholic.
Absolutely. It's really beautiful, and it's so sad. The history is there. It's so rich, but people don't appreciate it, and the faith is just being zapped out of Europe entirely. So you go to these ancient chapels and churches.
Yeah.
And, there's like 2 old ladies in mass. And, when we were in Sicily, we found this little church, and it had to be, I don't know, 800 years old. And,
Amazing.
There's some little old priest, and there's these 2 old ladies there, and we're coming in for daily mass, and, bringing in the kids. I think we had 5 at the time, and, little kids in tow. And, I'm so curious about your family travel habits, because we have the same mentality, my wife and I.
Cool.
We never, we were open to life and gonna have a big family if that's God's will. And we do, then we started homeschooling, and, the idea was to have a lot of flexibility. And so we actually spent, what was this? I can't remember now, 5 or 6 weeks. We rented an apartment in Sicily.
Oh, that's awesome.
When we had, I think maybe 4 actually. And, our oldest was like 5 or 6. And so it's just,
and people thought you were crazy.
Way of life.
Right. But people thought did people think you were nuts for taking like that young of kid, like, on world travel?
People in Italy thought we were nuts just for having 4 kids. I mean, we were
people
an
in Connecticut
anomaly.
think you're nuts too, by the way.
I mean, now we've hit 7. We have number 8 on the way. We're like across the threshold. I think we're even here. People might think that, but we're actually part of a great co-op, and it's not actually that abnormal for the community we hang out with. But it was crazy. We were in Ortigia, which is in Siracusa, and it's a port for cruise ships. And so these cruise ships would come in, and we found our little cafe. We'd go every morning for breakfast, and there was this alley, sort of off the alley, where we would sit at this table. And I remember this cruise ship docked, and all these people got off, these tourists, and they all had, they would be walking past our alley where we're sitting at this little table, and they all just stopped and stared. They'd start taking out the camera, and they started taking pictures. It was like we were a spectacle.
A sports
because
scene.
We're sitting at this table with 4 little kids. It's like, this shouldn't be that much of an anomaly, but it is.
Yeah, well, it definitely is. In certain cases, not that it should be. I want to go back. By the way, let me just back up 2 seconds in case people don't know you. So you are a clinical psychologist, but what makes you sort of interesting in a Catholic context is that you integrate Catholic anthropology and theology, spirituality, all that into this practice that you have. And before you got into your psychology career, from what I understand, you discerned a vocation. You joined the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. I've got a lot of good friends who are with the Franciscans. Father Agustino Torres was actually episode 1 of this podcast, just so you know.
Oh, amazing.
So
he's
that was
great.
like
I just talked
4
to him
years ago. Yeah. And after that, you were actually under the guidance of one of the founders, Father Benedict Groeschel, who
Yes,
himself is a psychologist, right? Or was a
that's
psychologist.
right. He was, yeah.
And then now you've got you founded Catholic Psych Institute, and you're kind of a pioneer in this idea of Catholic mental health services. I've also, just so you know, for background, have had Father John Hopkins on this show, who
Oh, nice.
is very active in Divine Mercy clinics and all that stuff. So anyway, just a little bit of background, but I just on folks in case they don't know you. But I did want to return
Yeah.
to something that you said, and it ties into Italy, because you talked about the little old ladies at this amazing chapel that's 1,000 years old, and like we don't even realize what's going on, and the faith dying in Europe, and all that is true. Having said that, very recently, I'm sure you've come across, there's been let's say a sort of halting of the acceleration to bottom out, right? Because I've seen some headlines that are rather optimistic, and I've looked at the data. It's not quite that good, but
It's not a resurgence by any means.
correct. But it does seem like it's a deceleration in the exodus from the church, and particularly around young men. So much so that in just a couple last 2-3 weeks, I've seen secular media like clips and headlines about how Catholicism is cool, and how, what's going on with the Catholic Church. And, even in my own diocese, we had 36% more, people entering the church this Easter than last year. And LA is the third largest archdiocese in the world, the biggest in the country. So there is something happening, which is good. But so when you think about that, those two little old ladies in Italy, and the sort of the dying of the faith, and you kind of juxtapose it with the stats I just heard, like, where's your head go? Like, what do you think is happening right now?
Yeah, it's a few things. I do think, like, sort of taking a step back, like really abstractly and spiritually, it seems to make sense that there are these sort of epochs, or these times of transition. And I can't figure out, like, on one hand, you have Monsignor Shea's book, from Apostolic Mission, or from Christendom to Apostolic Mission. And it's like, hey, let's wake up here and realize we're not in Christendom anymore. Like, it's time to get real. This is like going back to the time of the apostles, and we are preaching to a pagan culture. And I really see that. On the other hand, I think about how I have this theory, and it's shared by others. It's not, and this is not like, I'm not going to get crazy like conspiracy prophecy type stuff, but
no,
okay.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead. We've had, by the way, I had Father Spitzer on here, and we were chopping it up on UFOs and aliens and all kinds of stuff. So,
okay, good. So we've already set a little bit of a bar. I'm not going to go that far, but we can. I mean, we can go wherever you want to go. I'm happy.
That's right.
But essentially, you have Pope Leo the 13th, who had the locution of Jesus and Satan speaking, which gave us then the St. Michael prayer.
Yep.
And there was this 100 years or so that was going to be given over for Satan to do his worst. Well, okay, so somewhere between then and, now, 100 years have passed. I like to think that it was from the date of one of the possible dates of that locution to 1917, when Our Lady of Fatima appeared, was actually 33 years.
Oh, wow.
And then, and then obviously she talked about the errors from Russia, and then we have communism, and we have the breakdown of the family and the church, and we have all sorts of things that are happening that are the result of this sort of postmodern world that we live in. And so then, it was very possible. I was kind of hoping, 2017 could have been a big year. We could have had, but of course, there's no loud fireworks or anything, but it's like, okay, maybe we are sort of on the back end of that 100 years. And now we got Pope Leo the 14th coming in. And that was the first thing my mind went to. There's Rerum Novarum, of course, but there's like, oh, this is really interesting. It's like almost like bookends on this sort of time of Satan to do his worst. Maybe there is this resurgence that is brewing. And when you think about the pendulums that swing and culture, and there's a lot of opportunity here. So I don't know. Who knows? We won't know the time, the day, or the hour, right? But we can sort of make observations.
I think that checks out, though, because I definitely have been just even in my own personal life, getting to a point where I have a much deeper appreciation for seasons, right? You said epochs, which is an even better word. Eras, right? These sort of moments, because we tend to be, and especially as Americans, very kind of discreet about time. Like we want to, it's a 15-minute meeting. It's the, whatever it is. Like
Right.
we're very, very granular. But me having now, I'm kind of an empty nester. We were talking about it before we started recording. And that's like a new season. It's not just like, oh, I do different things or I stopped doing something, but it's the way that I approach things that's evolved and changed. My relationship with my wife has changed. The way I parent my kids, I'm still a parent, but like the way I parent should evolve. And frankly, if it doesn't, and maybe you can talk about this, it probably leads to some psychological and relational dynamics I don't want if I still remain in my old kind of way, right? So the whole new wineskins, to me, that is a seasonal or an epoch kind of a thing. Like I get that, understand that. And so it makes total sense to me that that these are all signs. It's not like a date, like on 2017, but these are all moments that when we look 100 years from now back to, we'll go, hey, it's interesting that all these things kind of started shifting around that time. And then now we're here, right? I mean, you mentioned Pope Leo, in particular him, right? So you got Rerum Novarum, but like what's the Rerum Novarum of AI, right? And all this digital stuff, because that's coming.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And there's all sorts of new stuff coming in. We have to have a refresh of, I think Vatican II is really brilliant. We're talking about, aggiornamento and risorgimento, where it's like taking the tradition, taking our truth, taking our foundation, but also, having this refreshment of really understanding how we apply it to this day and age. And we have to sort of see day and age. It's like, that's a seasonal thing. I love what you're talking about empty nesting too, because I was just talking to Christopher West about this, and I was bemoaning the fact that George Weigel wrote in his work on JP2, he was talking about the theology of the body as this ticking time bomb. And I was like, where's the explosion? And Christopher was like, you have to think about this on a much larger picture, like much larger scale. Think about this in terms of legacy. The work that we're doing is not going to bear fruit until probably after we're dead, like the real work. And especially for JP2, so when we say ticking time bomb, maybe it is going to be an explosion on the global sense and the sort of like all of history from the beginning to the end of time. Even if it takes 150 years, that's like a blip. That was where the bottom dropped. And so, just having these bigger perspectives, whether it's on these global things or if it's like within the lifespan, understanding the seasons of life. I mean, when we can take that step back, you really do see how everything changes with your mindset. And I think that we can learn a lot from that.
I think it's interesting you use the visual of an explosion, because there is a spiritual warfare element. So we are in a way in a battlefield, and sometimes that battlefield exists physically. Look at what's going on in the world. There are actual bombs dropping, right? That kind of thing. But, I view some of the explosions, like the explosion you're talking about, theology of the body, a particular papacy, as like the countermeasures to negative explosions, because I think that negative explosions are also happening, or ones that have the potential to be damaging. One of which I know you have some thoughts on that I'd love to hear, since we didn't get to them when we were just doing a little preamble, is about AI. And just so you understand, like my view of AI, and I'm not ascribing a value to this yet. It's not negative or positive, but what I have described AI as is in the past as an explosion, but it's a particular type of explosion. And it's like the scene in the movie, because I'm a media guy. There's a scene in the movie where the atom bomb, the nuclear bomb detonates, and there's this like vacuum, like right, and you see the light and the mushroom cloud potentially, but there's absolutely zero sound. It's like a total vacuum. And then like 10 seconds later, the audio kicks in and it's just like, right? I think we're in the silent period. I think the detonation has occurred, and we're like sort of going like, wow, that's really bright. What's going on? What's happening? And then like we're going to see that, like, whatever you want to call it, the aftershock or whatever, coming soon, because there's implications to all the stuff we're doing and all the rewiring we're doing. There's got to be.
Well, I don't know if you want to go here or not, but
Up to you.
I'm gonna tell you what I think about AI. But I use the same exact analogy, which is why, but it's in a very specific context with another element of something happening culturally right now.
All right.
And I wasn't even thinking about going here until you just brought up that analogy, because I use that analogy for these 2 points. One is AI, the other is psychedelics.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And it's the same. So we'll just focus in on AI for a moment, but
I do want to talk about psychedelics, because that's another thing that's just popping off big time right now,
and
especially where I am in LA.
Yes. So these are the promises that are being offered from the development of our postmodern culture to human suffering, and they're both false, empty promises, but they're both incredibly powerful, really important tools. And it's like nuclear power. So when you think about the good that can come from nuclear power, and also the destruction that can come from it, it's like, should we have never studied nuclear physics and gotten into nuclear reactors, and should we have just thrown away the whole thing because of Hiroshima and because of the threat of world war and nuclear war? Or how should we think about these things? So I've got a book formulating. Actually, I don't want to say the title because I don't know anybody else to take it, but this is the analogy that I've been thinking a lot about, because as a clinical psychologist, I'm looking at psychedelics, and I've been looking at them for about actually now 6 years, and it's incredibly powerful how healing is possible for people who are deeply suffering. And you have people in the throes of addiction and PTSD and deep depression, suicidality, severe anxiety, and all sorts of things that are wreaking havoc in their families and their marriages. And and then there's a lot of really promising research that shows that this tool, this medicine, can have incredibly positive effect. And so, okay, let's put that in one box. We'll compartmentalize that. Okay, then AI, we have like these solutions that are coming out faster than anybody can possibly keep up with them. And we were just talking about all these cool little tools that are being created on a daily basis that make our ministries flourish, that make it easier to reach new. So I have an 8-week course called a virtual retreat, and it's based on my content on what I've developed on Catholic mindfulness. Okay, so this is an application of abandonment to divine providence, the spirituality of total surrender, trustful surrender, with the brain science of what happens in the sort of professionally understood protocol of what's called mindfulness-based stress reduction. So not necessarily all the foofy guru mindfulness stuff, but like the actual protocols that are used in the hospitals. And I saw the connection point between the brain science and the spirituality, and I put it together into this course called the Virtual Retreat. And I only know English. That's my only language. I could travel to Italy. I maybe pick up a few words, but I'm not really good at language. That's not one of my strengths. I never learned any other languages. Well, all of a sudden with AI, I used Hey Gen, and I created an entire 56-day set of videos where the whole Catholic Mindfulness Virtual Retreat is now in Spanish.
Amazing.
And it's impeccable.
I'm sure. It's a native speaker.
I've sent it to all the Spanish-speaking people I know. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? They're like, I didn't know you were so good at you spoke Spanish so well. You can't tell that it's
You can tell.
fake.
You can't tell. It actually does all the embouchure and your voice, your mouth positions and all that stuff too. Yeah, no, I know.
It's my
crazy.
tone of voice. It's just it just transforms around your lips, so it looks like your lips are saying the words.
Yeah,
but the rest of the video is the same. All the mannerisms, everything's the same. And then it sounds and it speaks. I'm speaking perfect Spanish, delivering the whole course of content. So it's like, oh my gosh, that just opens up. I mean, I've gotten so many stories, hundreds and hundreds of stories of healing and reconnecting to
Thanks be to
faith
God.
and all these beautiful things. And I'm like overwhelmed at this ministry. And now I'm like, it just opened up to the entire Spanish speaking world.
And by the way, that was like not a thing 4 minutes ago. Right. So it's
Right.
not like you saw this coming a few years ago. Like, oh, I can't. It's not like bandwidth or the internet, like where I hope the internet speed improves and you can sort of see it coming. It was not possible on Monday, and on Wednesday it is. It's a logarithmic speed at which these things are happening.
Yeah, it's really incredible. So I it's understandable how scary that is. Because the unknown, it's like that silence before the explosion where the energy and everything is sucked up into that space where you're like, oh man, what's about to happen?
Yep.
And you just have to brace yourself because like, it's like, do we trust? That's really all. We have nothing else but trust. And it's like, how seriously do you take your faith? Wow. Like, do you mean it?
Well, so I definitely want to dive a little bit deeper into the psychedelics and the AI, but one thing just really quick that you reminded me of, and I'm actually looking at it here in the background. In fact, maybe I've never tried this. Let me see if I can try this. And if it doesn't work, we'll abandon it, but I've never tried to share something to the guest in the middle of a show, but I'm going to try it real quick on Riverside. Yeah. Let me actually try it just to show you. Can you see this little infographic?
Oh yeah, I can see it.
Have you seen this before?
No, I have not seen this.
Okay. Look at the difference between last year and this year in terms of the top use cases for AI. So in 2024, for the listeners here, in 2024, the number 1, 2, and 3 were generate ideas. Therapy and companionship was number 2, and number 3 was specific search. In 2025, therapy and companionship goes up a point. Organizing my life shows up. And then the third one, which is a little bit scary, find purpose.
Yeah.
So this evolution, the top 3, there's 2 new categories. And the one that was about companionship went up a point. So there's definitely this movement from like, oh, AI is cool. It can help me get some things done and it's tactical. But very quickly, it seems that a lot of people are turning to this, the more perhaps scary part, right? The whole, like, now I'm feeling the impact of the bomb, which is, this idea of companionship, of finding meaning, of trying to get my life organized, where a lot of that properly should be family, community, friendships, faith, things like that, where this thing can quickly, you can see it going off the rails, right? Potentially.
Yeah. I've been recently, actually, I'm about to publish a blog article on this that by the time you publish this, maybe you could link to it if it's interesting. But basically, sure. I've been looking at like what's missing from AI. Like even if these tools that are giving us these perfect answers, these perfect responses. I mean, the research that's been done on AI therapy is scary good. It's
you
like
mean
this is
you mean there's
really
positive
effective.
outcomes? Okay,
Positive outcomes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're showing that a lot of these therapeutic approaches that are utilizing AI is coming up with outcomes that are as good as or better than traditional psychotherapy.
But give me an example of what that looks like in practice. Is that like literally a bot that I'm talking to about how I'm feeling and it's prompting me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and I've used this myself, and just for more exploratory reasons, but and actually, I think I even did an episode on my podcast where I led people in an exercise that wasn't therapy, but essentially getting people to ask the AI to ask you questions to get to know you, what moves you, what fears you have, what joys you have, and then can match you with a good patron saint from the Catholic Church, and then write you a letter in the voice and tone, understanding the story of the saint. And it's like, okay, so let's say Saint Therese is your girl, and then it's like, all right, write me a letter from Saint Therese, and then you get this letter that it's like so spot on.
Gosh, that's crazy. That's crazy. My friend Drago.
You're reading this.
My friend Drago, who has not been on the show, he's the CEO of an app called Holy Habits. That's a spiritual direction app that he's kind of doing something similar with. And I'm not sure if he's using AI to do this. I'm sure he probably is, but to kind of map you into a spiritual direction food group in a way, sort of led or under the auspices of a great saint that kind of matches, whatever, whether or not you're a choleric or something weird like that. But it's like, it steers you in that direction. This is kind of leveling that up, what you're describing, because then you're like, getting like a letter of encouragement from Saint Therese of Lisieux in her own way, in her own style at the right moment. Like, I mean, that's pretty powerful.
It is so powerful. And then, so for therapy, we use different systems, and it depends on what the theoretical orientation of the therapy is, because obviously there's different schools of therapy, but some of them are more superficial, like cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's the kind of therapy that's done with like worksheets, and you can just sort of record thought records and thought logs. And then you go through like, all right, what's the next thought, the subsequent thoughts, and then, sort of getting into the underlying core, belief, and then challenging the core belief. And then, it's like this very manualized approach, and you can replace that like easily with AI. And then because you have the consistency of AI, when you have consistency applied to some of these models, because that's the problem with the human experience of therapy. Like you have somebody who's an expert in one particular orientation, but then it never sticks to the rules. We never stick to the rules perfectly. So you might go off course a little bit, and then, next thing you know, where are you in this process? You have AI do it, you're never off course. And the outcomes are actually really positive. We use a model or orientation called internal family systems, sometimes IFS. And this is where we talk about parts. We have different parts inside of us that feel a certain way, that believe certain things, that remember certain things. And once you get to know the system, which of course AI knows perfectly because it knows every book that's been written on the subject, then it can ask you questions, or it just looks at your chat history and it already knows the kinds of things you ask, the parts of you that show up at different times. And then it's giving you this like full outlay of what we call parts mapping. And it tells you who you are.
It's wild.
And then because it knows the IFS system, it's like, well, how do you actually move towards freedom? Because this is what you need to do with these different parts of who you are. And this is how you can restructure your interior life. And it's all applied to. Now, you could throw in like, I'm Catholic IFS. I want to talk about virtue. I want to talk about character development. I want to talk about self-gift, following Christ and picking up my cross. No problem. AI will do it all day. And then it's leading you to like great flourishing.
Wow.
So it's absolutely profound and in many ways beautiful, and then scary, because it's like, well, there's got to be something missing, right? I mean, do we not need people then? Do we not need each other? Do we not need therapists? Do we not need communities? Do we not need families? So there's like, I think, an inherent sense that most reasonable people still today have, that like, no, I think we need people still. But why? It's like, can you put your finger on and articulate why? Like, what about it? And that's what I've been working on.
Wow, that's crazy. Because then, it changes the question, right? The first question is how, and the how has been human therapist, a kind of therapeutic modality, some type of method, blah, blah, blah. Now the how can change, leading you to the, I still believe that these other things are part of my experience and should be important, but I have to answer the question, why? Right. So, which is fascinating, because clearly from what you're saying, the effectiveness of some of this stuff is showing really promising results. And so it naturally leads you to the idea of, I can help more people. I can do it more effectively. I can do it in a much more tailored way. Why wouldn't you want to? Right. So either there's a downstream implication as to why you wouldn't want to, right? The sort of like part I don't know yet, or there's this whole new realm of things that are being sort of ignored and put off that, that we now can sort of turn our attention to, because the how has been better addressed. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's because I think you said, like, hey, these things, the psychedelics and the AI can be these sort of false promises, right? In a way. To my mind, it's because there's a bit, it's related in some respects to a broader phenomenon, which you see in social media, which is the communities are not as good as communions, right? So like, it's great
Yes.
that we're in community. That's awesome. We're in Facebook Marketplace, or we're in the AYSO soccer team, or we're whatever, the Elks Club, or there's communities everywhere. And now that's like the biggest thing. It's like everything's community, but we've lost communion. But I don't know that people
Yes.
saw that before, right? So maybe in the same way, you know what I mean? They're going to find the why.
Yeah, this is my argument, and in fact, I use this as an analogy to begin this new article.
Mm-hmm.
That it's exactly like the advent of social media. When it first started, it was like Facebook. It's like, oh, how can you connect with people on your campus? The original Facebooks. I remember having one. I was a freshman at Boston College. I remember getting the actual physical book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all the other people that are in my class, like I see all their faces in this book.
Wow.
It's like, oh, I see this kid in class or this girl in class. It's like, whatever. I'm going to go talk to her. I'm going to go talk to him, whatever. And it's like, oh, yeah, I know who you are. I go home, look up the cute girl, figure out her, where what dorm, what hall she lives in or whatever.
Sure.
It's like, I happen to be going to the, cafeteria near that hall. And, so that it's like the tool is facilitating deepening human relationship. And then they're like, oh, let's put this online, and we make Facebook as a platform. Like that seems like a simple step. It seems like, of course, if we could do this digitally instead of in the physical book, like what's the problem? And it was localized to schools. And so you're still just getting access to the Facebook of your school and getting entered into this larger community. And then you could get into other schools. But somehow that very quickly progressed into what we know social media today. And the thing is, it was the promise of facilitating social relationships, and it was an empty promise. And then it ended up making us more superficial and less less in communion. And so here's the problem, though. It's like we all know it, and we're all still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it tapped into something else along the way. It transitioned. Now, with AI, it's like the same problem, but just on a much deeper level. And it's not just community and relationships in general, but it's now getting into the deeply personal interior life of individuals.
Yeah.
Because
that's sort
it's
of like that, what do they call it in theological terms? That's the inner forum.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting into the inner forum. And in the inner forum, we need absolutely other people. And then if you go deeper, it's like, well, like that seems like a pretty abstract. Is that an A priority? Or like how can we prove that? But it's actually because of what AI promises that it actually can't provide what we need. And it's because AI promises perfection, and what we need is imperfection.
Wow.
What we actually need to grow is suffering.
Yeah.
And so all the ways that AI is making our life easier and faster and more efficient and quicker, and it's taking all the human out, it's taking the messiness out of human engagement. And at the end of the day, why we're going to end up completely devastated by this, far more than social media in general, is because it's promising flourishing without suffering.
That's it. That's the core insight right there. It's got to be. It's basically Easter without the cross. It's Easter without Good Friday. It's no need for redemption, no need for transformation, for transcendence, for the phoenix kind of coming out of the ashes, because there's no ashes.
Exactly.
Everything's perfect.
Exactly. So if we can use the tool and it brings us back to humanity and back to the messiness
and the suffering and the imperfection of humanity. So perfect example. If I have a little conflict with my wife and we're stuck and I'm trying to figure out, like, why am I not hearing what she's saying? And, how can I sort of understand her better? We both go off to our corners and we jump on our chat GPT, and we're like, all right, help me understand this problem. And, I get to work and I'm sitting there with my chat GPT and it's actually helping me understand. I'm understanding myself. I'm understanding her position. And now this thing is telling me, like, brilliantly, better than any marriage therapist ever could, like, what it is that I'm doing, what it is that she means, what it is that we want to arrive at as a conclusion. Now, let's say she gets on hers. She goes through the same process. Totally accurate, same brilliant analysis. She understands herself better. She understands me better. And we both come back together. We're like, hey, guess what? I get it. I'm sorry. Let's do the conclusion, whatever that compromise or whatever that solution was. And she goes, I get it too. I'm sorry. Let's do that. Let's do the conclusion. We've arrived at the conclusion. And then we never say another word about it again.
Yeah, you don't do the work.
What's missing? The work.
The work.
Like, that was the problem. The problem. The problem was not the problem. The problem was the messiness in me interacting with my wife.
Yep.
Not knowing how to be patient, not knowing how to be compassionate in the moment, not knowing how to actually listen to her, even though I have very strong opposite feelings. Whatever that messiness is, it's the crucible, it's the refiner's fire. It's going through that together that affords the opportunity for me to become more patient, more charitable, to listen more deeply, to become more self-sacrificing. It's not that we just needed to get to okay, we're going to build the deck. Okay, good. We figured it out. It's like, no, that wasn't the problem. All the other stuff is actually what needs to happen. And that's what we have to be super careful of. So if it's like, okay, so is and you kind of maybe alluded to this. It's like it's an instrument, it's a tool, and it's kind of value neutral. But it's like, could we use that instrument to maybe I can fortify, maybe I get a little less perspective, maybe I get a little help, and then we come back together to actually draw out the conversation.
Yeah, but you have to pretty quickly set the parameters, right? Even what you just said is huge. I would think as I hear it, it helps me even in sort of use cases that are not about therapy or psychology, but you have to set the guardrails. You have to set the parameters. Like,
yes,
I will use AI insofar as it doesn't keep me from doing the work in a therapeutic setting. I will use AI insofar as I don't, and I think that those parameters and those guidelines, because are a kind of a theological or ecclesial understanding of AI is not yet developed, and it's going to take a while for it to get there.
Right.
Like, we're in this kind of, like, again, that zone where the bombs hit, but we don't know yet, right? And we're in that kind of weird period. But it seems pretty important that we set those parameters, pretty quickly. And by the way, the thing you're talking about, doing the work, I mean, this is, in a way, it's very intuitive, right? I was talking to somebody just earlier today about note taking in a meeting. I had a meeting this morning with my team, and they were asking, what's, like, there's this document where we put our notes in or whatever, and they're like, how useful is this? Does anybody use this? And we had this whole conversation about, when you're taking notes, it's not even about going back to look at the notes. It's the note taking itself that is kind of like, helping to record that better into your brain.
Yes.
And something similar is here, right? Where it's like, yeah, the messiness, the coming together, the weird working through the passive aggression or working through whatever it is that you're working through, that stuff is part of the thing you're trying to get to make the other side more, to stick and, like, last and whatever. If you just go to the end where it's like, oh, this is the outcome, let's just all arrive there together, and you skip over the work, it's like a false truce in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Am I saying this the right way?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%. There's a bunch of cognitive psychology on this that is already showing that. And, even we were talking about story before, this AI tool that'll write the story for you. And this is incredibly dangerous
because the process of writing a narrative or a story is more than just the outcome product. It's actually going through the mental cognitive process, and there's learning that's happening in the brain that's developing the brain. And so essentially by creating these tools, if we're not careful, it's going to atrophy really important parts of the brain. It's kind of like in Wall-E when all the people are floating around in their chairs, and because they're like, okay, well, why do we walk? We walk to get from point A to point B. Well, we can do that with less work. We can get in a floating chair, and now we can go to from point A to point B. And we could, drink Slurpees all day. And, all of a sudden now you're fat, slovenly, obese. You can't get out of your chair because we're just being floated around all over the place. So the use of the leg muscles atrophies, it's no longer possible. That's what's going to happen in our brains. And that's what they're already showing. There's already research to show that, even literally in just how to write a short story. And so, yeah, we have to be super careful that we are really intentional and understand the tools that we're using before we go too deep into it.
How is the psychedelic phenomenon similar to what you just described?
It's so analogous on a whole different plane. It's a whole different category, but it's, again, the promise of a solution that gets to a place without doing the work. And the thing that's, I would say, scarier, worse, and more dangerous is that it's not just promising the solution to human relationships and the need for relationship in your interior life. It's promising, in some places, in many places, it's promising a relationship with God. So this is something that's incredibly disastrous and really dangerous, and something I'm very, very, very concerned about is that it promises a mystical spiritual experience without having to do the work of understanding who God is, of understanding where tradition and religion actually comes together and integrates with spirituality. It's like the next level of spiritual, not religious. And it does provide an interior experience that is almost indistinguishable from the interior experience of the mystical life.
It's super dangerous. I have a brother who's a priest and very active in deliverance ministry. And what you just described about the danger reminds me of this is from the book of Acts, early church, some of the Jewish, I guess they would have been called the Judaizers. They were sort of Christians, but they believed that you had to adhere to the old Jewish ways, that kind of thing. But really early God-fearers, put them in that category, that went in to cast out demons in Jesus' name, but weren't really believers. And scripture says that they basically just got their butts whipped by these demons and ran out of the house screaming naked. It's in scripture. I think it's chapter 19 of the book of Acts. But the idea there is that when you're going to go in to do spiritual battle with demons, there's work, there's authority, there's a bunch of things that need to happen. You don't just like go in there and start casting out demons, under your own power. You're not prepared for that. And I could imagine a psychedelic experience. I have no experience with psychedelics at all. I do have some experience as a college student with some drugs. Thanks be to God, that never became a problem for me, but never psychedelics. And I can imagine that, like, I get a glimpse of what I think the beatific vision is, but my brain is kind of mush. I'm not ready for it. What does that do? Never mind whether it's even true or not, because there's, I don't know how you feel about it, but some of the descriptions I've heard about some of these newer things, with ayahuasca and DMX and like all these different things, like I gotta imagine maybe you are seeing some of the spiritual dimension. You're not just imagining you're seeing it, right? But either way, you're not ready for that in a lot of cases. And if that's part of the promise or part of the reason, and you make contact with it, that could be a nasty, cocktail of things that can come out of that as a result.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting time for the church and growth. I think I like to use I like to use theology of the body as a
Hmm.
kind of framework, because you could see that the sexual revolution, well, even the advent of the birth control pill itself, but then the sexual revolution, it necessitated a development of a deepening of understanding of the theology in the church. And so, so it's like, yeah, we had to go through that mess to be able to articulate much clearer and further and deeper the beauty of
Yeah.
theology of the body. And I think we're at the same point in time where it's like we're going through this mess, both with AI and with psychedelics, and in being able to articulate something that's even deeper and more profound and more beautiful than we even understand today. And I've been in this space now for, like I said, 6 years, and I've gone through the training to really understand on the other side of this what this looks like. And so I've gotten certified actually as a psychedelic provider, and it's not legal in Connecticut. I don't actually do it, but it's something that is up and coming. So I wanted to be ahead of the curve, especially speaking with a Catholic voice from a Catholic platform of Catholic psychology. And so it's very interesting what you're asking and what you're thinking about in terms of the inner experience. And what I'm starting to sort of think about and sort of playing with as an idea here is that I think we may be developing an even deeper understanding of integration,
Mm.
of what it means to have a biological substrate that has the capacity for spiritual experience, and that
Wow.
there's this integration between the body and spirit that I think, because we're all suffering Cartesian dualism, like we don't really appreciate how much the body and spirit are one.
Yeah, the
But
hylomorphic of the body. Yeah.
yeah, so what happens is when you can almost turn on a biological switch with a chemical, that's almost it's like it's part of that system that interfaces with the spiritual. It doesn't mean it
Yeah.
is spiritual,
I get
but
that.
it means coming from the biochemical angle where we're flipping the switch and we're turning things on that map to spiritual experiences. It's not the same as a fully spiritual experience, but it's also not totally separate either, because we're not split body and spirit. So we end up in this really weird place where it's like, well, how can we make sense of this? And
Wow.
that's I've gone deep into sort of the Eastern Christian mysticism. The Eastern Church, they're so filled. They have so many more stories of saints with mystical sort of miracles and supernatural experiences,
Yep.
but they also have so much more appreciation of the integration with their body.
Yeah.
So there's a
Absolutely.
ton more with like fasting, and like Saint Hildegard of Bingham was an herbalist,
Yep.
and she was like very deeply in the healing herbal stuff, and like people don't necessarily appreciate that part of it, where it's like, no, our God became man, like it's the incarnation. He had a human body. Like this is a connection to the divine through the biology.
Totally. Well, by
I
virtue of
think
that
I think
incarnation, he transformed all of matter. And I think that's what you're
ex-
sort of getting at, is like that doesn't,
yes,
it's not like we are it's like a I don't know, it's like a device that is plugged in or not plugged in. In other words, plugging in would give us the power to run the thing. That's not the
right,
way that we are. The matter
right.
itself contains something, right? This idea of being hylomorphic, made of body and soul and all of that. But what you're describing, this is a terrible example, I'm sure, but what I kind of got the image of when you were talking about the substrate was almost like we're like a jawbreaker, right? We've got like layers of stuff, and there's not just like some we're not like a vehicle that the soul is within, but we've got these like very capillary intertwined layers of which at different levels the sort of soul part of it is in the matter part of it, and they're very, very like tightly integrated. And so when you put a chemical in that, it kind of can mimic or activate other things, right? And that's why you can have this sort of wild spiritual biological simultaneous reaction to a psychedelic.
Yes.
That, like, I could totally see, like, 100 years from now, some encyclical on this dynamic, right? Because this is deep stuff about, like, how we're integrated as
Yes.
creatures, you know what I mean? And what it means
Yes.
that Christ sanctified matter. Like, we get that almost romantically, but we don't understand it actually, you know?
Yes. I love how you said that. Yes. Yeah,
Wow.
I think that's right.
That's your next book. Or is that your current book? What do you?
That's maybe part of the one I'm working on, but it's just like there's so much we don't know, there's so much we don't understand, and if we can stay up with these developments, that it's like culture, technology, human progress forces us to stay up with it and stay up to date and like stay on top. There's always going to be a Catholic answer to whatever the world manages to produce. And then the Catholic answers to the emerging problems are always going to help us go deeper in understanding the revelation of Christ.
What exact, like, just staying for a moment more on the psychedelic thing, when you say psychedelics, like, what are you actually referring to? I said earlier DMX, it's actually DMT, but what are you referring to? Like, and are some of these things natural? Are they made in a lab? Does it matter? How do you even define it for the purposes of the certificate and the thing you talked about?
Yeah, so there's a broad range of drugs, and it has to do with it. It comes from the words for revealing one's psyche to oneself. So it's like the things that take us interior, and then ultimately, it's really so interesting, the misuse of words here, but because I think that the proper word actually, when we stick to the proper definitions of things, like psychology is supposed to be the study of the soul, and I think that's actually, it should be that. It's not. And then psychedelic should be the opening up of oneself to one's soul, but it's also turning into that. That's not it either. It's going out to like, oh, this is how we discover God, which, okay. But it's the idea of something that brings us really interior. It's very different than it's not addictive. That's important to understand. People always say like, oh, you're going to get addicted to this stuff. We have, if it's going to be used as a medicine, there's a lot of false narrative culturally, especially in America, that we've suffered because of the 70s, that we're going to have to unwind a bit. But, if used correctly, medicinally, and under proper care, it actually is incredibly healing for people. And so DMT, ayahuasca, there are synthetic versions of things like LSD that have been created in labs. And then there are things like psilocybin, which is the active component of magic mushrooms that grows from the ground. And they're all slightly different, but they all have this basic similar quality of essentially the way that I think about it is that it's like being consciously awake in a subconscious dream. So we have very deep layers of the subconscious that we sometimes get access to in dimly, not fully aware, like in a dream. So when we dream, we're seeing things that are actually happening in the subconscious, but we're not with our full conscious awareness. And so it's like you're running underwater, or it's in slow motion. You're running on the land, but you're in slow motion or whatever. You can fly, you can whatever. It's like things are, but these are subconscious, psychic kind of archetypes, and the world of interpretations and associations and symbols. That is the way that our subconscious works. That's a whole nother book. But essentially we get access to it. These chemicals give us a space to have conscious awareness of the content that's held in our subconscious. So instead of being in a dream state, it's as if you're just awake and exploring things, and you can talk about them, and it depends on sort of what level of intervention you're at. There's, very deep dives, but then you come out of it, and then you can speak with a therapist, and you're doing what's called actually integration therapy, which is when you're using that experience to go deeper into some of the things that have been blocking you that you're not even aware of, because our defense mechanisms are so profound. They're so sophisticated, and that
they block us from seeing what's held in our subconscious, sometimes for decades. And so this is a way to get underneath all of that in order to have access to what's really going on in me, and then be in the proper context with a therapeutic relationship where the person who's guiding you knows the parameters and what is a spiritual life and what is not, what is psyche, what is not. That's when these things can be unpacked in a really healthy way. So does that give a little clarity?
For sure. I have a question as a follow-up, though. As a Catholic and a psychologist, when you hear about some of the things, and again, I haven't personally experienced this, but I've seen videos and testimonials of things like time dilation, when somebody's been out of it in a very deep state with ayahuasca or salvia or something like that, and it's been 4 minutes, but in their experience they were there for 6 months. Or things like, oh, I saw these beings and all of that. Do you believe that's happening in reality? In other words, is there really, and you don't have to, I'm not going to hold you to this. Maybe you're evolving your thinking about it, but do you think that those things are actually supernaturally occurring, or is this somebody's perception of things that are occurring?
Yeah, again, this is not a non-answer, but I'm going to point to I think that this is challenging our conception of even the question. The assumed premise of the question is that those are two separate things. And so what I think happens is that we have a spiritual receptivity built into our psyche. And there are things that are happening on a spiritual level that we hold in our subconscious and that affect our subconscious. I think that the drugs are giving us access to our subconscious, but I don't think that that's an either or, and that's entirely non-spiritual. So I think I don't know. I mean, this is evolving. It's definitely an evolving theory and an evolving understanding of this, but I think somewhere in there's an interaction between the psyche and the spiritual reality that I think it's mostly, like, in terms of the actual articulation of things, I think it's mostly in the psyche, not in reality. But I think that the psyche is formed by an imprint. It's kind of like discernment when you say, like, well, how do you know God's will? It's like, well, what's the deepest desire of your heart? If you really know the deepest desire of your heart, you're getting closer and closer to God's will. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Like, he stepped in from the outside and he, like, as a foreign invader, placed something in me? Or it's like, no, he formed us and knit us in the womb, and he built into us his will. So there's something of God in us in the depths of our heart, and if we, like, go into ourselves, we find something of him. Is that a either or is it a both and? I think it's probably more of a both and.
Yeah, definitely a subject for discernment itself. Can you go a few more minutes?
Sure, I could go like 5 more minutes if that's okay.
Okay, I want to ask you one important question here, generationally, given what we've been talking about. We've been talking a lot about AI. We've talked about digital exposure and all that stuff. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what are the most kind of pronounced things, mental health struggles, that you're seeing among maybe folks in this generation? I don't know, call them younger folks, Gen Z, however you want to define it. And how are they different from, or alpha, or how are those things different maybe from other things that have happened from a psychological standpoint in previous generations?
Yeah, I think there's just been a complete eradication of God and of tradition and of any kind of inheritance of legacy, that the newer generations are completely on their own. And it's like here's a mess of humanity, figure it out for yourself, and we're giving you nothing to start with. And it's become like the sort of the right way. The gospel of today is that you figure it all out yourself. And we are not built for that. We are not built to be plugged into the cosmos in history in a moment of time as an absolute foreign alien. We are built in our deepest DNA, in our humanity, in our soul, to be in a line of a generation, to know our ancestry, to know our our lineage. And so this is absolutely disorienting for people who are like now in the world and then starting to look around, and they're like, there's no anchor point. There's nothing to ground on. And we're just not built to handle that. So that's how we can explain all the disaster of anxiety, depression, and the deepening of these things, where it's like crazy physiological things that are happening, seizure disorders, all sorts of weird stuff that's happening to kids and these young adults that are sort of without any kind of beacon of light. No, there's no lighthouse. There's nothing shining any sense. There's not even like the boomers and then the millennials. It's like you had an idea that you reject something from your parents. And it's like implicit in that is I'm getting something from my parents.
Right.
And then you get a little older and you're like, well, dad was actually probably right about most of this stuff. And maybe I reject some of it still, but I'm going to take some of it and I'm going to think about that. And then I'm thinking about what I'm passing on to my kids. It's not even in the equation anymore.
Wow.
That's what I see is really at the root of some of this distress now.
A final question for you. If the church was going to create or be behind the creation of a new institution for mental health that was rooted in Catholic anthropology, what would that look like? Is that like, would that resemble a monastery? Would it
be called
like
the Catholic Psych Institute?
Which people can find
at CatholicPsych.com.
There you go.
No, I do. I think monasteries are huge. I think about this a lot because obviously that got us through some dark periods of history and maintained culture and literature and so many things that the monasteries did for us. I don't know. It's a great question. I think because of the internet, I think St. Paul would have been on Instagram. I think the media is really important, but I think we need to have institutions of formation that have a deepened humanity.
Yeah.
And so whatever these new developments are, through sexual revolution to theology of the body, through AI to a deepening of understanding of human formation in imperfection, and maybe even psychedelics to a deeper understanding of hylomorphic integration of body and spirit, all of that's got to be taken into a consideration, accounted for in the formation of the leaders of the church. And wherever that needs to happen, I have no idea, but I think that's what needs to happen.
I agree with you that the monastery is a key part of this. I had the monk and musician, very famous John Michael Talbot, on the show, and he talked about he was talking about the National Eucharistic Revival at the time. He's like, I think that's awesome. We look, the Eucharist is the source and the summit. But he goes, I hope the next one is a monastic revival, because that's what our country needs. And very much cueing on the stuff you said about the Eastern churches, right? In the that sense of that mystery, but also very incarnational understanding. Like both of those are very present in the monastic world.
Yeah, and it brings us back. Yeah, it's simple things. It brings us back to fasting. It brings us back to kind of circling back in our conversation here. Even the liturgical, even the orarium. I mean, think about, as a friar, 5 periods of prayer a day, 5 hours of prayer a day, like periodically spaced out throughout the day. And it keeps a rhythm of life and a rhythm of the day and a rhythm of the week and a rhythm of the year. And like all these things that are so deeply human that monastic life and religious life, actually, they are maintaining it.
That's another way to think about the dynamic of doing the work, is like the AI and all these other things are allowing us to skip the rhythm and get right to the end. But the rhythm is all around us. God created it in all ways. It's even in the middle of our chest. Our heart beats to a rhythm. There's work. There's things that need to be done, right? So another way to think about that. Well, Dr. Greg, appreciate what a real blessing and privilege to have this conversation. You got to come back when you're in LA. Let's do this. Let's do this in person. In the meantime,
I would love to.
Anything you want to share beyond Catholic Psych Institute, books, something else you want to talk about, or how can people get in touch?
Yeah, go to CatholicPsych.com. We have a newsletter you can sign up for. We provide mentorship to people around the world. We have a remote model for our integrated therapy that we provide. We call it mentorship. And we got a lot of resources and courses and different things to check out there at our website, CatholicPsych.com.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming by. It's been a real privilege to have you and have this discussion. And friends, if you're listening to my voice and that of Dr. Greg, it's time to follow this show, subscribe, share this episode with a friend. Talked about a lot of stuff. I'm sure there's something in there. There's lots of nuggets that can be shared and amplified for that person who's looking for them. Until next time, see you again. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Being Human podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to help us spread the word and hear more, please head over to iTunes, leave us a review, and subscribe, as it really helps us to get our content out to more people. Be sure to listen next time as I take you deeper into what it means to be human. If you want more free content and information about what we do at the Catholic Psych Institute, head on over to CatholicPsych.com. God bless you.